team needs to make a trade?
Ready for this?
Yeah.
The New York Knicks need to make a trade.
Okay,
they have multiple first rounders, but they're not lottery picks, right? And their team is kind of like that. They have a lot of good players, no great players. Derrick Rose was once great. He's a very good player, but that's what he is. They have no A's, a bunch of B's and B pluses. You have young, improving players that got selected. Barrett, but he's not great. Maybe one day he can make all-star teams. Who knows? Julius Randle, we saw in the playoffs, is at best a third best option on a championship caliber team. They need to package the stuff they have, including their draft picks, including maybe a player or two, and get into a position to nab an impact player. Whether that's a guy who's been drafted recently on another team and who has real upside, or whether that's someone in this draft.
Well, I know that they're 19 and 21. They've tried to package that to get up into the lottery to get one of two players, potentially Chris Duarte from Oregon, or the guy they really love, Davion Mitchell from Baylor.
Mitchell, yes. Duarte, no. Like
Mitchell's more of a now
shoot,
guy.
So what?
Yeah, Mitchell's more of an upside, super high upside guy, but that's why they can't get into the lottery. 19 and 21 will not do it.
Right. Well, they got to maybe package some players and see why. If they move up for Duarte, that's a problem.
For me, I'll look at Detroit. Now, this is not a knock on Cade, who I just waxed poetic about.
Yeah,
at least I tried. But think about what Boston did a few years back when they traded from 1 to 3. They weren't sold on Fultz. They loved Tatum. They knew they could get him. I said then he was the most offensively polished player in the draft. That was a great pick. If you're Detroit and you have a very depleted roster, why not look at maybe moving down 1 or 2 picks with Houston or Cleveland?
Pass on Luka? Okay.
Maybe, yeah, but if you can get Mobley or Jalen Green, who we all believe are
pass on Luka to get Kobe or AD?
Yeah, exactly. Or McGrady. And add more capital. That's a really interesting play. Now, I think it's unlikely. I know they've listened to talks. They weren't 100% sure that Cade was the guy, but it is something to consider if you're the Pistons.
So you're saying Cade is not appreciably... He's not of a different level player than Mobley or Green.
I think Cade, Green, and Mobley are all in a very special tier by themselves.
Interesting. Okay, because a lot of people, it seemed like he was head and shoulders above the pack.
I think it's like 1A, 1B, and 2.
I like that. Okay, Max, who will make a trade?
Okay, ready for this? I think the Warriors are going to make a deal.
Really?
Because they have a very shrewd front office. Because Klay Thompson's coming back. Steph performed at MVP level. Draymond's getting a little long in the tooth. They have 2 lottery picks.
Yeah,
they have Wiseman, who's like a lottery pick, but he's got a year less control, but a year more experience. They have some guys who can play, like Poole and Pascal. They have some guys on the roster, but they don't really have that third awesome piece to go with Steph and Klay. And in the NBA, you never want to break $1 into 4 quarters, but if you got 4 quarters, you can go find $1, you go do it. So like my rationale for the Knicks, I think the Warriors have so much good stuff. They have a surplus of assets. They're going to go get something great.
I like that. I'll also look at the Philadelphia 76ers. We're back to Ben Simmons. Now, I don't think it's going to happen tonight. I've been told around the league that Ben Simmons will get traded, but Philadelphia, Daryl Morey specifically, feels like let's let his stock come back to earth a little bit. It dipped so much, it plummeted during the playoffs. He's still a very good player, a very young player, but Philadelphia knows that Embiid is the guy. So look at Dallas. Dallas is a really interesting potential trade partner. Kristaps Porzingis needs a change of scenery, as does Simmons.
And Porzingis for Simmons?
I think that's
so.
Really
you're going from 2 teams with like unbelievable point guard center combos, Simmons, Embiid, and Luka Doncic, and you're creating twin towers with Embiid, Porzingis, and 2 point guards with Luka and Simmons?
But I would, and this is not an insider, I'm just saying this is what I like if I'm both teams. Both teams need a new start, or both players need a new start. But if you're Dallas, you don't need to play Simmons in the same role. He can play off the ball as well as a cutter, and also alleviate some of Luka's ball handling responsibilities. Think about it, Mac. It's not that crazy, and the salaries match up pretty well, Molly.
That was Towns, if Porzingis stayed healthy.
No. Where should he be traded?
Okay, I floated this a couple weeks ago. I'm looking at Portland. Lillard wants out at this point, pretty obviously, right? Yep. Now, you got to slow down these high-powered Western Conference offenses, and they can't do it with that small backcourt. And this involves also moving your bigs. But the first step is, what can you get for Lillard? I think you could probably get Simmons, Thibault, who's second-team all-defense already, who's going to be, maybe this year, the best defensive player in the NBA, and maybe hold that position for like 5 or 10 years, right? Like, he's special defensively. You probably get Simmons, Thibault, maybe Maxey, and draft picks, something like that. And it's worth it for Philadelphia because they bring in a superstar who paired with Embiid and then, lesser Tobias Harris. you have more of an answer to Brooklyn if Brooklyn's healthy.
All right, last one here, quickly. Give me a sleeper or a GM. I mean, a GM or a gem.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
I mentioned Sengun. I'm going to go with Josh Giddey. He's a gym sleeper hybrid because he's been talked a lot about Memphis at 10. He has risen over the last 18 months. He's only 18 years old. He's the youngest player in the draft, Australian kid. You mentioned Thibault. He didn't make the Australian team, but he went up against Thibault in workouts, and it was really good. And Matisse talked about that. I think with Giddey, you're talking about a 6'8" point forward who handles the ball extremely well, very athletic. He was the Rookie of the Year in the NBL, where LaMelo and R.J. Hampton were. He does not shoot it particularly well, but he has good mechanics again. He's a worker. He's a learner. And everything about him that I've heard is that Josh Giddey is going to be a really good NBA player, if not an all-star. He's a sleeper gem at 10. I love the Australian.
After Schmitz went on the air earlier and talked about Davion Mitchell, I don't know if this qualifies, but I'm going with it anyway. When a guy named D. Mitchell, an undersized scorer named D. Mitchell who wears number 45 is available, draft him. D. Mitchell, number 45, draft him. Like, it's the same sort of thing. He's a great defender. He can obviously handle. He's a little guard.
He plays bigger.
And he can shoot. What else is there exactly? What else is there?
And 2 years ago, he was buried. Davion Mitchell was on the Auburn bench. Transfers to Baylor, becomes a national champ, and one of the premier players in this draft. I love that call, Max.
Absolutely. Jordan, this was a lot of fun. Great chopping it up with you. Enjoy the draft
Enjoy
tonight.
the draft.
Yes, and hopefully we will see you soon.
Hope so.
We'll do this
Thank
again.
you.
All right.
GM and that staff just wants to keep talking through it, evaluating it. I don't think it's any hesitancy they have with Cade Cunningham. I think it's really just about how good they think Evan Mobley and Jalen Green are.
Yeah, it's funny. I just left Jalen Green. We're having a conversation about that. He said, I think I should be number one, which, of course, a lot of kids think as they enter the draft. But I said, did you tell the Pistons that? He said, absolutely. So he gave them something to think about there. Are you hearing any trade whispers or teams that are particularly interested in moving up or down as we approach the draft here?
Well, there are a lot of conversations, Rachel, about teams who, certainly would like to get in that top 10. This is a tough top 10 to get into. You're going to have to give up a lot. And I think, we saw the trade with Memphis getting that 10th spot. Certainly a lot of teams knocking on the door with Sacramento at number 9. But I think really the big trade talk over the next couple days is going to continue to be centered around Ben Simmons in Philadelphia, Daryl Morey and Elton Brand and their front office. They've been canvassing the league to see what they can get for Ben Simmons, and they're asking for a lot, almost a Harden-esque type package of all-star player, draft picks, pick swaps now start. And this is a player, remember, who has 4 years left on his deal. They don't have to do a trade by the draft or by the start of next season, certainly, but they're motivated to find a deal out there, and they continue to talk to teams. I don't get the sense, though, that they're close to anything, that there's anything imminent, that they have a team yet that's ready to unload the kind of assets they would like to get at this point for Ben Simmons.
So interesting. I think that will be a story for us this week, next week with free agency, all through the offseason. I do want to get back to that trade you already reported. You just referred to it. Jonas Valanciunas heading to New Orleans. Steven Adams and Eric Bledsoe heading to Memphis. The Grizzlies also slid up to the 10th pick in the draft as part of that deal. And are you hearing anything about the Grizzlies in particular trying to move up even higher then?
I certainly think the Grizzlies have the assets now to move up again if there's a player that they target. But how far is it worth giving up future picks? How many spots is that worth getting up in the draft? I don't think they're going to get much higher than 10th. And I think being in that top 10 allows Memphis to get a player they really like there. And someone's going to drop to them at 10 that perhaps they're not expecting to drop today. New Orleans paid a steep price to get those contracts off, to get some cost certainty now heading into free agency. That Lakers pick next season, that Memphis gets in a deal, and of course going from 17 to 10. Memphis has potentially 3 first-round picks in next year's draft, and obviously a chance here to get a really good piece at number 10. And this is obviously a team that's already gotten in the playoffs. We've seen that young core. You'll have Jaren Jackson Jr. back for the entire season next year. Memphis is really set up nicely now for the future. In New Orleans, they've got cap space now to go out and get involved with Kyle Lowry, perhaps a Spencer Dinwiddie. And if those things don't work out, they can now match an offer sheet or re-sign Lonzo Ball to a deal. So they've got the ability to kind of shore up that guard position and perhaps even get maybe more of an established older point guard in there, which I know David Griffin's wanted to do to kind of anchor that team.
And it's interesting on the Memphis side, too, when you talk about adding draft picks to their core. I mean, not only did they draft well in getting John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr., the fact that those guys developed into stars early makes whoever they bring in now, they're all on the same timeline, really, which is incredible and not a position some of the other teams around the league are on. I do want to get to a non-draft item, though, because earlier today you reported Nets assistant coach Mike D'Antoni is leaving the organization. Is he retiring? Is he planning on pursuing another head coach opportunity? Why is he leaving Brooklyn now?
Yeah, definitely not retiring, Rachel. He came in and helped Steve Nash, who certainly he's had a long relationship with, and helped him through that first season as a head coach. And Mike D'Antoni was a finalist in Portland for that head coaching job, I'm told. He'd like to be a head coach again, but I don't think he wants to do the day-to-day grind of being an assistant again next season. If there's perhaps another role in the league somewhere else that isn't that day-to-day full-time assistant job, perhaps that might appeal to him. Obviously, the head coaching hiring cycle now is over for next year.
Yeah, it's so fascinating watching him and Steve this past season. Steve talking to us so much, Woj, as you know, about how valuable having Mike there was, especially when they had the transition with James Harden coming in. I know that organization